A storm was brewing off the San Juan Islands when the diver heard it, a cry no whale should make. Static, broken, like grief, turned into sound. "That's not ship noise," she whispered, heart hammering. But what she found beneath the waves wasn't just a trapped orca, it was a decision that could rewrite the line between rescue and ruin. Dawn comes thin and silver over the San Juan Islands. Fog lifts in shreds like breath torn slow from the sea. Elena Brooks breaks the surface beside her skiff, mask beaded with salt, lungs burning clean. A gull cries once, then the water goes very still. She hears it before she sees anything, a thin whistle, high and broken, stitched with brittle clicks. Not a harbor porpoise, not the resident pod she knows by heart. This is younger. Frayed at the edges, she treads gently, letting the swell carry her, and slides one palm to the gunwale. On deck, the hydrophone waits, its cable coiled like a sleeping rope. A red LED blinks, steady as a heartbeat. She wipes her mask with the salt-wet towel, sets the recorder to capture, and lowers the mic into the green. Sound climbs the line, like a message through bone. Another whistle. Shorter this time. Cut in half, as if the breath behind it faltered. Her training hums in the background. Distance is respect. The ocean is not a place to prove courage. 10 meters off the stern, a small spout feathers the fog. The surface ripples once and closes, no dorsal yet, no clear mark. Just the soft hush of a youngster somewhere under the skin of the bay. She weighs the line between response and restraint. Call the hotline now, log coordinates, wait. Or kick toward the sound and tip the scales of a life she does not own. Elena rests the hydrophone against the current, lets the sea write the first sentence. "Listen first," she says under her breath, a promise more than a rule. The clicks return in quick bursts, then fade toward the kelp bed. A ferry horn moans from the channel, low and far. The fog brightens a shade. She notes the time, the depth, the shape of the call. She remembers a mentor's warning, help is not always a gift, and silence can be. Another spout, closer now. A small black fin barely scars the glassy surface before it slips away. Her chest tightens, not with fear, but with responsibility. She keeps her knife sheathed, she keeps her distance. The recorder blinks on. The ocean remembers, she thinks, and lets the water carry the voice home. The boathouse sits low to the tide line, cedar-shingled and salt-stained, a simple rectangle of wood and will. Mornings gather there the way fog gathers in a cove, quietly, without asking. Elena Brooks keeps her life pared to the grain, a single burner stove, a rack of charts dog-eared at the channels, a workbench where cables sleep in tidy coils, and every tool has a hook with its name. Coffee steams in a chipped mug, seaweed dries like dark bunting along the rail. When the door swings open, the whole room exhales brine. She didn't always live this spare. Once, there were conference rooms, calendars layered like scales, and the clipped tempo of federal work. She'd done her years inside NOAA field seasons, in rain slickers, policy seasons, in shoes that never saw rain. She learned the science and the silences, how to hear what a dataset wouldn't say, how to stop the language from promising more than the ocean had given. Burnout didn't arrive as fire. It arrived as ash. So she stepped sideways from the machine, not into retirement, but into attention. Out here, the Salish Sea feels almost like a study partner. It doesn't flatter, it doesn't forgive sloppy listening. Tidal currents run like long muscles through the straits, curling around islands stitched with fur and madrona. Harbor seals lift wet, whiskered faces at the world and drop them again. Bald eagles sit in wind-bent cedars like dark punctuation. Vessels pass, ferries, crabbers, weekend sailors, and the water keeps its ledger in wakes and noise. Against one wall, Elena's hydrophones hang like instruments waiting for a cue. She built the array to be simple and stubborn, low self-noise, good sensitivity, a preamp that forgives rain. The recorder's red LED blinks when she checks battery levels, the tiny pulse, oddly human. She trusts that little light the way farmers trust barometers. It never lies. You either caught the world speaking or you didn't. Her work now is a narrow corridor between curiosity and law. She knows the rules of non-interference by heart, not because she's timid, but because the ethics are the bones of the work. Distance protects the animal from being taught the wrong lesson, that humans are part of any answer it needs. She keeps the numbers off her tongue and on her clipboard, a private litany of standoff ranges, speed limits near whales, and the boat lanes where sound is already too crowded. The point is simple. Respect is measured in meters and in choices. Dialects live in this water. The resident orcas, fish eaters, carry family phrases that repeat and repeat until they become the shape of kinship. Their calls rise and fall in patterns Elena can sketch from memory. The big orcas, the mammal hunters, are quieter by design, disciplined hunters in a loud century. Both speak in clicks and whistles in bouts of sound that turn the water column into a room where sight is less important than echo. Calves tend to sit higher in pitch and shorter in breath, the way young voices everywhere do. She knows these things the way a carpenter knows grain. Not as trivia, but as touch. On the bench, a salt-wet towel waits for the next lens to fog. She uses it like a ritual. Wipe, breathe, wipe again, an old habit from cold deck watches when she needed one clean circle of glass to pin the world through. That towel will keep reappearing. It is her small tether to patience when the ocean's clock runs slower than a human's. Her days settle to a cadence. Launch at grey light. Drop the hydrophone where kelp fronds undulate like dark flags. Let the cable slip from her palm. Feel the faint tug when it kisses the thermocline. On a calm morning, she can hear a ferry thrumming 5 miles off, the engine beating a steady tattoo through water dense as rumour. Seals cough on a rock. Somewhere beneath, a gravel bed moves with the breath of a tide. She logs spectrograms, scrolling heat maps of sound. If a call rises from the noise floor, a ladder of harmonics, a little tremor at the end, she bookmarks it, tags time, depth, tide phase, vessel proximity. She never rushes to name a voice. Names have gravity. Locals know her now. The crabber in the green skiff lifts 2 fingers from the wheel when he ghosts past her mooring. A state officer stops by once a month to trade weather stories and remind her, gently, about whale-wise distances. No one has to push. They can see she's built a life on the side of caution. Still, the sea has a way of pulling the hem of certainty. Every season brings a test, an entanglement, a ship with a captain in a hurry, a storm that knocks the markers out of place. When she replays yesterday's capture, she hears it again, the broken whistle that doesn't fit the resident lexicon she's archived. A stress click cluster, short, hard-edged, bites the end of the phrase. The call cuts off mid-breath. It is not a signature she knows, it is not random. It feels like a thread thrown from something small, somewhere near the kelp bed where currents can trap more than crabs. Elena notes the coordinates in tidy block letters. She writes nothing dramatic in the margin, just unknown juvenile, repeat at dawn. Then she closes the log, sets the towel over the lens hood, and glances once at the LED, that tiny heartbeat. Outside, the tide turns. The bay inhales. Somewhere under the green, a young voice gathers itself to speak again, and whether or not she is ready, the day will ask her to listen. Dawn breaks colder than forecast. Wind runs cat's paw patterns across the bay, lifting a slick of chop that slaps the skiff in impatient beats. Elena throttles low and noses toward the kelp bed she marked last night. The hydrophone sits ready beside her boot, the red LED a small insistence in the grey. She doesn't need it to hear the first sound. A spout, thin and rushed, then a whistle that snaps in 2. She stands, scanning the wrinkled surface. Kelp bulbs rise like dark marbles. Farther in, something black rolls, then vanishes. Not a log, not a harbour seal, too upright, too quick. She eases the skiff to idle and drifts until the kelp parts around a shape no bigger than a canoe. Dorsal fin, small, triangular, nicked at the rear edge. A calf. The body tilts, there, bright plastic against black skin. A crab pot line snakes under the pectoral, loops once at the tailstock, and drags a half-sunk buoy that jerks with every swell. The calf tries to rise, the line bites. The blowhole clears only for a heartbeat before water washes over it again. Another breath, ragged, clicks flare sharp and desperate, then stutter out. Elena's stomach drops, then steadies. Training climbs into her hands. She reaches for the radio. "Marine Mammal Stranding Network, this is Brooks on a 16-foot skiff in West Sound, San Juan. Possible orca calf entanglement, sending coordinates now." She reads them, twice. "Animal surfacing but compromised. I am not entering the water, standing by for instructions." "Copy," the dispatcher says, voice calm and clipped. "Team is 2 hours out minimum, keep distance. If the animal can't ventilate, and only if you can do so from your vessel without contact, assist to clear the blowhole. Do not pursue, do not tow, stay on channel." "Understood." The wind stiffens. The buoy tugs the calf into the kelp where fronds web around the line. Elena kills the engine to keep prop wash from driving the mess tighter. For a moment, everything stills. Then the calf rolls again, slow, exhausted, and the whistle comes thin as thread. She lays out the tools she's allowed: boat hook, line knife taped to the shaft, a coil of soft rope to drag kelp aside. She sets the salt-wet towel over the rail to keep the lens from fogging, habit more than need, then plants her knees and edges closer with the oars, feathering the blades so the skiff slides, not shoves. "Easy," she says to herself, to the sea. "I'm only here to make air." The calf surfaces on her port side, 5 meters off, the buoy wobbling like a bad thought. Elena waits for the swell to lift them together, then reaches, not for skin, never for skin, but for the line just ahead of the blowhole. The hook catches the wet rope. She braces, lifts, and for a breath-long instant, the loop rises away from the calf's crown. The animal exhales, a clean, strong plume that hangs in the cold like a prayer. She lets the line drop, backs off a meter, heart beating in her teeth. Again on the next swell. Hook, lift, cut, a single, quick stroke to sever a trailing tag that had cinched the loop tighter. Not towing, not steering, just removing what should never have been there. The calf blows twice, longer now, and the clicks change, fewer, slower, like someone catching breath after a sprint. Elena radios the update. "Partial relief, line still at tailstock, animal ventilating, I'm keeping distance." "Copy, maintain visual if safe, team en route." She drifts back to the edge of the bed, palms stinging, breath loud in her hood. The calf hovers within the kelp, testing its new air. A ferry moans somewhere beyond the point, and the kelp whispers against the hull. Elena lowers the hydrophone and listens. The whistle comes again, still young, still frayed, but the end note holds. She keeps her knife sheathed, she keeps the engine cold, she keeps the recorder blinking. The choice she made is small and exact: air, not ownership. After that, she will wait, she will listen. The ocean remembers. The day learns to breathe again, but only barely. Wind puckers the bay in small, impatient fists, then smooths it flat as if ashamed. Elena keeps the skiff in the lee of the kelp bed and watches the tide let go of its night-long grip. The calf holds inside the dark fronds, using the green like a wall. The cut tag she freed earlier dangles harmlessly now, but the tail stock still drags a coil that snags when the swell drops. Anything more from her would tip from aid to interference. She knows the line. She guards it. She calls in updates the way a field medic reports vitals: respiration intervals lengthening, surfacing steadier, whistle phrases short but more regular. She doesn't say hope. She says numbers. Numbers can travel where feelings can't. The calf shows itself in fragments, a slick black back glistening like oiled slate, a white eye patch that flashes and vanishes, a small dorsal with a nick near the trailing edge. It doesn't play, it doesn't spy hop. It takes air and spends it carefully, the way mountain people measure stovewood in January. When the buoy bumps kelp, the line shivers, and Elena tastes old metal at the back of her tongue. She lowers the hydrophone and watches the red LED on the recorder blink with the patience of a metronome. Sound rises like heat from a road. A click burst rattles the headphones, pebbles poured across a drum, and a thin, frayed whistle that lands shy of its own ending. Juveniles push air like they're learning an instrument. This one is playing on a cracked reed. Still it speaks. Still it tries again. By late morning, crab boats skate across the mouth of the cove. The first skipper sees her raised palm, throttles back to whale-wise speed, and ghosts past in a wide arc. He taps 2 fingers off his cap toward the kelp, a question folded inside a courtesy. Elena nods and lifts the radio. He nods back. I'll give room. You keep me honest. The choreography is simple and it matters. The stranding network pushes an ETA. 2 hours stretches toward 3. Ferry wake stacks on tide chop until the cove becomes a restless bowl. The calf tucks deeper into kelp. Elena edges to the outer margin so she keeps line of sight without penning it in. She eats a bar without tasting it. The engine stays cold. Her knife stays sheathed. When the team arrives at last, rigid hull, inflatable, orange life vests, soft voices, they move like people who have practiced thinking under urgency. A woman in a dry suit kneels, reading the water. A man coils a throw line and lets it fall into his palm to feel the weight promise true. They fly through the checklist out loud, a liturgy of restraint. No chasing, no roping, no gear on flesh. Lighten drag only if the animal voluntarily presents the tail. Abort at the first refusals. They thank Elena not for helping, but for not helping too much. It lands like a benediction. The sea says no. The calf refuses every angle that would let the cutter meet rope. Twice it rolls, but not close. Twice the buoy snags in weed, and the team backs off exactly as the rules require. We'll stage beyond the point and try it slack, the lead calls. Keep logging acoustics. We'll need the rest pattern. Elena nods. Relief and ache twist together in her chest. She wanted a miracle that would also obey the handbook. Those pages rarely touch. Afternoon polishes the water to pewter. Wind releases its fist. For 1 long hour, the bay becomes a listening bowl. She lowers the hydrophone again. Shrimp crackle like dry rain. Kelp sighs on rock. A harbor seal coughs on a shoal. Then, farther out than the calf, a lattice of lower clicks drifts through, methodical, a searching sequence sweeping course to fine, like a craftsman's hand, over unseen grain. A second signature answers so faint beneath the ferry's baseline, she almost misses it. Longer breath units, slightly wider sweep, adult profile, maybe female, not proof, never say proof. But direction whispers into wire, a voice is working the outer reef. Elena marks time, tide, surface state. She does not move toward it. She does not press playback. The rules of non-interference aren't weather-dependent. She sets the salt-wet towel over her lens hood, wipes a clear eye into the fog, and keeps her attention in the green where the calf turns like a slow thought. Dusk lifts bioluminescence out of shadow. Every tail flick writes ghost green fire on the surface. Brief, beautiful, gone. The calf surfaces once, so near her breath wants to hitch. A spout feathers the air, no flourish, just oxygen. Necessary is its own kind of grace. Night drapes the cove, the moon wears a torn edge. Elena ties off a little outside the kelp, kills her lights, and lets the world narrow to sound and shape. The LED beats its tiny lighthouse rhythm on the recorder face. The calf's phrases lengthen by centimeters, an impression more than a measure, and the last notes wobble with fatigue rather than panic. Beyond the reef, the lower clicks sweep again, now and then blooming bright, when a thermocline bends sound like glass. She writes, 2213, probable adult outside cove, no visual, juvenile ventilating every 50-70 siete. Under it, without thinking, hold distance. She sleeps in quarter hours, waking to a map of different quiets, ferry rumbles smudged by headland, gulls dropping shells on rock, the dull kiss of driftwood on hull. Each time she checks the lens, wipe, breathe, wipe. The towel crusts with sugar salt along the edge. Just before midnight, the calf ghosts to her beam and holds for 3 breaths. Elena sits very still. No handout, no light. She lets the recorder do the reaching. The exhale drifts cool across her cheek, a remembered ocean on skin, then the animal slides back into kelp's stitched dark. The following clicks sound less jagged. She doesn't call it trust, she calls it air. At slack, the rescue team noses in again, wakes feathering. A long-handled cutter slides under the surface like a cautious idea. The calf shows flank, white patch, black curve, then sinks, leaving only a crease in the dark. Metal bites nothing but water. The team leader tips a palm, not tonight. They idle out, the bay swallows their noise whole. Dawn returns with thin ribs of light across the channel. The tide flips, pressure turns with it. Day 2 begins. Elena's hands wring heat from a mug. A crabber idles by, already slowed, eyebrows asking the only question that matters. She answers with a flat palm, still here. He nods, cuts speed again. By late morning, gulls sweep the shoreline like commas. The calf edges out of the densest kelp, tests the open water, returns to green as if on a string. Elena runs a short transect, dropping the hydrophone at intervals to sketch the places where the animal rests. Spectrograms stack on her screen, heat maps of voice and tide. She'll send upriver to labs that still answer her emails like old friends. Credit won't matter, accuracy will. When wind returns, it carries the smell of rain that has washed cedar and stone. Whitecaps scribble impatience through the channel. Out past the reef, the click train grows faint, then strong. The way sound slips when ocean layers shear. A new note threads the top of the calf's burst, a fluted squeal, almost musical. Calves do that near kin, or when trying to be. She does not steer, she does not signal, she lets the ocean carry its own message. Evening lowers like a hood. The buoy still tugs. The tailstock still wears its ring of wrong. The problem remains unsolved, but not unchanged. On her last line of the day, she writes, holding pattern, juvenile stable, possible adult at range. Then, small for no one but herself, help is not ownership. She clicks the recorder off. The LED winks to black. In that brief hush between systems, she hears only what was always there, the ocean counting its own heartbeats, before she draws one long breath and lets the skiff drift the width of a sigh. Morning scrapes in under a lid of pewter. Wind backs southeast and stiffens the water to a dull, marching chop. Out past the point, the shipping lane wakes up, steel on schedule, engines pressing low, thunder through the strait. Noise stacks on noise until the bay feels crowded with things Elena can't see. Sound is vision here, and today the window fogs from the outside. She lowers the hydrophone and the red LED blinks its small, faithful pulse. The calf's voice surfaces, but the edges are blunt, shaved down by passing hulls. Click trains smear like fingerprints in rain. The little whistles land short of themselves. Elena narrows her eyes at the spectrogram. The ocean is talking, but the room it talks in has been taken over by machines. From beyond the outer reef, the lower search clicks return, measured, methodical, patient as a pendulum. Then they vanish behind a freighter's baseline. When the wake rolls through a minute later, the pattern blooms again, faint and sure as a heartbeat the stethoscope keeps losing. Direction whispers, then goes mute. The calf answers, a squeal stitched to the end of its burst, trying, reaching. Elena logs everything and feels the clock turn heavy in her chest. She can wait. She can always wait. But waiting isn't always neutral when the world is this loud. The stranding network checks in. Any change? Juvenile stable, adult profile intermittently audible outside the reef, vessel masking severe this morning. A pause, the kind that is less about doubt than about weighing law and outcome. We can request a slow-down advisory for the lane if the pattern holds. Keep your station. Do not transmit lure sounds. Understood? Elena says, and means it. She won't play a mother's dialect like bait. That way lies ownership dressed as rescue. She stows the handset and watches the chop square itself into little fists. The buoy tugs. The calf holds to kelp like a tired swimmer clinging to the lane rope. A gull drops a clam on rock and misses, tries again, succeeds. The world goes on doing what it does. Elena looks at the speakers stacked under the bench, small, weatherproof, hardly more than megaphones for water. She built them for workshops to demonstrate how sound travels, not to steer whales. A thought forms anyway, quiet and exact. What if the ocean could hear the calf better, not a copy, not a call? Song she chooses, but the calf's own live voice, amplified just enough at the reef's edge to survive the freight drum of the lane. Not leading, not summoning, just clearing a path through interference. She tastes salt and old argument. Tools can turn kindness into control faster than tide turns a bay. She sits with it, counts her breaths. The rule remains, distance is respect. Then she picks up the radio. Network Brooks, proposing relay at Outer Reef. No playback libraries, no dialect mimicry. Live pass-through only. Gain limited. Placement outside cove, well clear of juvenile. No attempt to reposition animal. Purpose is audibility, not direction. The line clicks with a different weight. You'll hold station inside, no chasing. I'll stay off. Speakers on a floating line clip to a marker. If the mother is where I think, she'll hear him clearer. If not, nothing changes. A long exhale from the other end. That's within guidance. Keep gains conservative. If the calf moves toward the reef, kill it. Copy. Elena works fast but tidy. She pays out a buoyed line from the skiff and rows it to the reef's shoulder, hands light on the oars so wood makes no speech against water. She anchors the tiny speaker array where swell will rock it but not slam it into stone. Cable runs back to the recorder. The LED keeps time. She dials the fader low, no more than a room voice in a house already full, and opens the channel. The cove changes shape in her ears. The calf's clicks and whistles pass from the hydrophone, through the cable, through the modest cones, and back into the sea beyond the reef, unaltered, except for volume, which is barely more than a lift of the chin. No song of hers, no choreography. Just the juvenile speaking where the mother might actually hear him between engines. For a long minute, nothing answers but chop. Then the lower clicks return with a precision that raises the hairs on her forearms, coarse to fine sweeps, a shift in repetition rate, a kind of echolocation zoom, as if the searcher had turned its head. Elena's hand finds the salt-wet towel without looking. She wipes the lens, breathes, wipes again. She does not raise her voice. She does not move her boat. The calf lifts for air. Spout, small, clean. It turns, not toward the reef, but outward by a hand's width, then settles again into kelp. Elena slides the fader down a whisper more, and then holds everything still. Her job is not to conduct. Her job is to keep silence possible. Ships pass. Sound bulks and thins. The adult pattern flickers but remains, present, patient. Once, a fluted squeal coils high above the calf's burst, the kind you hear when kin are near enough to matter. Elena writes, but doesn't let the pencil mean more than graphite. She thinks of all the times she has wanted to hurry a story across its river and how often the current has its own say. Afternoon drops its color. Rain arrives as a fine, steady veil. The reef darkens to an ink line. Elena checks every knot. The floating speakers bob like harmless buoys. Nothing in their posture says command. Everything says passage. Toward evening, traffic slackens. The lane's drum softens to a far, steady bruise. In the quieter water, the outside clicks sharpen, a line, then step closer, by a measure she feels before she knows. Not proof. Never say proof. But the cove seems to hold its breath. Elena closes the fader one notch. The calf breathes on beat. The reef hums. Somewhere beyond the line where green water goes slate, a larger life takes its measure of the channel and turns. She writes, relay active, no approach, adult contact consistent. Then she sets the pencil down and lets the ocean carry the next sentence without her. The storm walks in on rubber soles, quiet, then everywhere. Rain needles the channel flat, wind combs white through the outer reef. Elena slides the hydrophone deeper until the cable hum changes pitch. The red LED ticks on her recorder like a small, stubborn star. She hears it before she believes it. 2 voices at once. The calf's click burst comes first, quick, bright, still a little frayed at the tail. Under it, something larger moves, lower clicks, spaced like steps on stone, sweep coarse to fine, then hold on a tight, deliberate rate. The spectrogram prints a braid. The room of water has 2 speakers now. She doesn't move. She trims the relay fader a hair down, keeps the floating speakers breathing small at the reef's shoulder. No summons, no lead, just space cleared. The wind throws a sleeve of rain across the bay. In the grey beyond the kelp, a double spout feathers and vanishes. Not proof, she tells herself. Again, let the ocean finish its sentence. The adult begins a call unit she doesn't own a name for, low, fluted at the edge, a tone that rolls under the clicks like a bow under a string. The calf answers with a thin whistle that used to break in 2. Tonight it holds, not long, just long enough to change the air around it. Elena's hand finds the salt-wet towel. Wipe, breathe, wipe. She keeps her headlamp dark. She keeps her mouth shut. The cove listens with her. Rain hardens. Thunder stutters somewhere inland. Through the headphones, the outer pattern advances 1 body length at a time, then pauses as if the search were taking bearings on the storm itself. The calf shifts in the kelp, 1/2 meter outward, no more. A small black dorsal cuts rain ripple, then sinks. Again the double spout, closer. Eleanor kneels on the deck to lower her profile and sets the skiff to a gentle lee. She spares 1 thought for every rule she has ever obeyed. Distance is respect. Let water do the touching. The 2 click trains touch, momentarily synchronized, then sliding apart, then finding each other again the way 2 pulses line up on a long walk. A high squeal coils out of the calf that wasn't there yesterday. Not like this. The adult's reply is a brief shaped packet of sound, clean, decisive. No human word fits. Recognition is the closest one has ever come. Beyond the reef, a broad back lifts, rain laying silver pins along it. The adult holds just a breath longer than she needs to see, then leaves only chop. Elena feels the change before she graphs it. The calves click slow, deepen, lock into a steadier cadence. The whistle that once snagged at its own end lands true. The room of water seems to widen. She eases the relay fader down to almost nothing. The sea no longer needs the path cleared. It has made one. For a long minute, there is only weather and breath, spout, spout. Then both voices angle away, not fast, not panicked, just committed. Past her bow, the surface dimples where something big has moved through with care. Elena writes 1 line she will keep. Overlap achieved. Juvenile stabilized in presence of adult. Then she stops writing. She lets the recorder keep the rest. When the thunder rolls back to the hills and the rain softens to a heavy mist, the outer clicks fall to a polite distance. The juvenile's phrases shorten to working length, the speech of travel, not distress. The LED keeps time, steady and small. She sits with her hands flat to the deck, palms salt slick, throat tight. She has done almost nothing. She has left the door unlatched and stood aside. Across the water, something old and exact has crossed a threshold without her. The ocean remembers. She thinks and does the only thing the moment asks. She turns the relay off. By dawn, the storm has unstitched itself into ragged mist. The bay looks scrubbed, its skin new. Elena wakes to the small sounds a calm makes. Kelp, ticking rock, rain loosening from firs. She checks the line she set at the reef and finds the floating speakers riding easy, harmless as gulls. Beyond them, the water is empty in the good way. No restless boil, no trapped buoy jerking a life off balance. She lowers the hydrophone 1 last time. The wire hums. The red LED settles into its patient pulse. In the headphones, there's travel speech, not trouble. Two click trains working in comfortable tandem somewhere past the point. The juvenile's whistle trimmed shorter now, practical, like boots tied before a long road. When breath breaks the surface, it does so as a pair. Spout, then spout again, spaced just wide enough to hear the room of water between them. They angle away, not fast, not afraid, only decided. The cove breathes without them and does not feel abandoned. Elena eases the relay fader to 0 and coils the cable. The speakers come aboard wet and ordinary. They are just tools again. She wipes her lens with the salt-wet towel, that small circle of clarity she carries from day to day, and stows it over the rail to dry. Along the rack line, the sea has given back a few things it never needed. A severed crab pot tag, a length of scuffed polypropylene, a twist of kelp pretending to be rope. She nets the waste without commentary, sets it in a crate, and radios the stranding network. Animal cleared the cove in company with an adult. Ventilation normal, no pursuit. Debris recovered, minimal. Their reply is mostly the sound of people letting their shoulders drop. Copy. Nice work, holding the line. Work, she thinks, is sometimes the choice not to touch. She sits on the skiff's thwart with the recorder in her lap and scrolls through the night. In the ladder of pixels and color, there is a moment where two bands, juvenile and adult, overlap so perfectly that the pattern turns almost plain. No drama to it, just fit. She flags the window and trims a copy. 3 breaths, 1 answer. A little rise at the end like a hand, set gently back on a table. She names the file with time and tide, nothing else. The rest she archives with the day's notes, a ledger of distance kept and measures met. On paper, she writes the line that has been waiting, released, not rescued. Then below it, smaller. The ocean remembers. The wind shifts northwest and fingers sunlight into the water until the whole cove glows bottle green. A crabber idles past at whale-wise speed. Cap lifted in a question. Elena answers with a flat palm, all clear. He gives a small salute and slides on, wake low, engines kind. For a while, there is nothing to do that counts as doing. She lets the skiff drift the width of a breath. When she finally starts the motor, it's only to move into the ordinary. She runs the shoreline slow, eyes on kelp where trouble likes to snag, and sees nothing but tide doing its old, patient work. At the boathouse, she hoses salt from cable and steel, lays the hydrophone in its cradle, and sets the towel to dry on a nail where sun can find it. The recorder's LED goes dark when she clicks it off. One small heartbeat, choosing rest. Out beyond the point, faint and proper, a double spout lifts and dissolves into sky. No flourish, no need. The story isn't over. It has simply moved to deeper water where it belongs. Elena listens with her whole body for a beat longer than necessary, then lets the quiet fold back into itself. The bay holds its shape. So does she. Days lengthen by a fingertip at a time, and the bay resumes its ordinary grammar, gulls as commas, ferries as long, patient lines. Elena lets the boat work shrink back to chores that smell of rope and sun. She rinses salt from the hydrophone, oils the cracked rubber of a cable sleeve, and hangs the coil from a nail where light can find it. For a long while she just stands there, watching the slow drip darken the cedar plank below. A tool drying is not a celebration, but it is a kind of peace. On the screen, the night's ledger waits, blocks of color that once felt like emergency, now reading as music with the sharp edges filed down. She replays the small window she flagged, the moment where 2 click trains braided and the calf's whistle landed clean. She listens twice, then once more with her eyes closed, and saves a copy with nothing fancy in the name, just date, tide, and overlap. The rest goes to archive, not a trophy. A record of distance kept. Word travels sideways in these islands. A week later, a researcher from Vancouver, someone who still answers Elena's emails with patience, sends a short note and an audio clip captured off a listening station north of the strait. No conclusions attached. Just, "Thought this might interest you." Elena plugs in her headphones and hears a juvenile cadence that feels familiar, trimmed now, stronger, the tail of the phrase no longer fraying. Beneath it, an adult pattern paces, a presence, not a crutch. She doesn't write "the same pair." She writes "a pair like that," which is the honest shape of hope. She prints one still frame of the spectrogram and pins it above her desk beside a tide chart and a faded map, not as proof, not even as comfort, but as a reminder that listening leaves traces you can live by. Under it, she tapes a single sentence in tidy block letters: "Released, not rescued." The boathouse gathers small rituals. The salt, wet towel gets washed and folded, then retired to a clean hook, kept, not needed. She strings a short line of shells along the railing, each with a hole worn by time, because some things only come through if you wait long enough. On a strip of stubborn soil between drift logs, she starts what she calls the listening garden: beach pea and seaside daisy, and a thin run of grass that clicks against itself when the wind freshens. Plants named for sounds, not looks. When neighbors ask, she says it helps her practice paying attention to the parts of the world that don't want to be looked at first. Her log changes too. The entries shrink to weather and waypoints, to notes about crab pots that drift where they shouldn't, and a reminder to restock cutter blades before fall. Every few pages, an unforced line appears, like a tide pool between rocks. Silence kept, vessel slowed, lane advisory held. The work you can count doesn't always match the work that counts, but some afternoons the two agree. At the end of a long Sunday, she sits with a pen and a blank sheet and writes a letter she doesn't intend to send. "To whoever finds your voice," she begins, and pauses until the room feels honest. "Listen first. Let the water keep as much of the story as it can. If the ocean asks for help, say yes with your hands open." She folds the page and tucks it into the logbook, where the page edges drink a little salt from the air. Once, near dusk, a double spout lifts far beyond the point, thin in the distance, almost imaginary. Elena does nothing with it. She lets the small lift of her chest rise and fall, the way the bay rises and falls under the slow hand of tide. The skiff rocks once against the mooring. Behind her, the LED on the recorder sleeps dark. Meaning doesn't arrive as a flourish. It arrives like this. Tools in their places. A garden that will keep its own counsel. A pair of call patterns, stronger, somewhere she will never see. She closes the boathouse door and listens to the hinge take its quiet bite of night. "The ocean remembers," she says, not as a claim, but as a promise to match. This is Paw Prints and Stories. Stay gentle, the ocean remembers. Some encounters arrive as thunder, others as a breath on the water. If this story found you, let it be a reminder to listen first, act last, and leave as little of yourself behind as the tide allows. We share these moments to keep wonder intact, and boundaries too. Disclaimer: this story is for inspiration and education. Do not approach, feed, or attempt to assist marine wildlife. Any intervention must be carried out only by trained responders operating under local and national authorization.